kitchen and bathroom remodeling business, which we will describe this afternoon. Presently, Clark spent his career in his family's heating and previously, Clark spent his career in his family's heating and air conditioning business, eventually selling it to service experts in 1996. Clark enrolled at BYU in 1974 as a Spencer W. Kimball Scholar. After serving a mission in Japan, he returned to BYU and graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in accounting in 1980. Clark is married to Jeanette Christopherson of North Ogden, who we met at BYU. They are the parents of 5 children and grandparents of 4. Their oldest son, Randy Shurtz, is currently a doctoral candidate in the chemical engineering program at BYU. So we'll turn the time over to him and in appreciation for his coming and sharing with us today. We have a gift for him. And let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, folks? Raise your hand if you can hear. Today I'd like to talk about becoming a more profitable servant. You know, I've found out that people learn better with stories than they do with lectures. I heard once that a lecture is the transfer of information from a professor's notes to a student's notes without passing through any brains in between. And we don't want it to be that way today. So I'd like to try to make it interesting for you. You know, the big guy's my dad, Royden Shurtz. And I'm the little guy, just shortly after I arrived. We lived in Alberta, Canada. And my dad was working at one of the many jobs he held about that time in his life. He was very skilled as a natural mechanic, but he didn't have a formal education as much. In fact, on a technicality, he hadn't graduated from high school, which allows me to say that I'm the first person on my pedigree chart who ever graduated from high school. Well, when I was about 7.5 years old, my dad decided he needed to get an education, so he picked up and we moved from Canada to Provo so that he could attend BYU. His idea was that he'd use his mechanic skills, repairing appliances with some other students, in order to support himself while he was going to college. Well, within a couple of years, we had a few more sisters in our family. There were 6 of us, and he couldn't really go to school and support the family too, so he stuck with business. And he became the first entrepreneur that I ever knew. And you know, when I was 22 or so, I remember talking to him one day, and I was just in awe. I said, "Dad, how did you dare be an entrepreneur? How'd you dare go start a business? I mean, there's so much risk involved in everything." And he said, "Son, you know, it was really pretty easy. I was out of work. I owned some tools, and I knew how to fix things. There were some people who had stuff that needed to be fixed. I was in business." That's about all it took as far as thinking about it. Now, if you'll remember, you're reading this book, The E-Myth. That's how most entrepreneurs get into business, right? They happen to be a technician, they're good at what they do, and one day they have an entrepreneurial seizure, fire the boss, and now they own their own job. Can't be fired anymore. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more later. As a youngster, I helped my dad carry his tools around and stuff, and when I got to be a teenager, I went out and got a job on a dairy farm. I thought it was pretty cool because I could drive, and they had a little tractor with a little scraper on it behind, and my job was to scrape the corrals out every day. And it wasn't a very clean job, and after a couple of years, I moved on, but I learned a lot from that experience. Now, I went on a mission to Japan and came home, and my dad offered me the greatest of all work school opportunities. He had just barely set up a double entry bookkeeping system for his business for the first time, and he asked me to be his bookkeeper. And so I started out as his bookkeeper, even though I didn't know anything about bookkeeping, and I studied and I signed up for accounting at BYU. And as I was taking my accounting classes, this little business was just like a little laboratory. You know, it was great, and I learned accounting pretty well. Now, I have to admit that I made some mistakes in my education. I think at that time you had to have 128 hours or something like that to graduate from BYU, and I graduated with 128 hours. I didn't take one extra class. In fact, I treated it almost like a technical school. I was a pretty good accountant when I came out, but I hadn't gone very far afield. So I take my hat off to all you music majors and exercise physiology majors and everybody else who's in here in an entrepreneur class, because if I could change one thing about my education, I would have broadened it. I would have got outside of accounting and tasted a little bit more of what there was out there. So I graduated from BYU, and I had an offer in hand from Exxon to go to work in their internal audit department in Corpus Christi, Texas. And my dad really surprised me when he made me an offer to stay and work for him. He had this little heating and air conditioning business in West Provo, and so I stayed. And over the next decade, I had some great experiences working with Dad. And my younger brothers came along, and so all three of us brothers were working in our dad's business. Now, I will tell you that I made a fatal mistake, not a fatal mistake, but a bad mistake during those 10 years, is that I worked hard. I worked hard every day. I worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week in that business. Did you catch what I just said? What's the E-Myth say? You got to work on your business instead of in your business. Well, I worked hard in my business for 10 years. And I didn't make very much personal progress during that time. Now, when I came out of college, I had some tools in my tool belt. They were limited. I was a pretty darn good accountant. I knew how to account for a small business. And I had communication skills that were pretty good too. So I could talk with people and write things and read them and understand them. Now, over the next few years, I worked with my dad and my brothers, and I was involved in management. And you know, I did the best job of accounting for an unprofitable business you have ever seen. I don't think anybody's ever done as good a job for a whole decade of keeping all the perfect records on how a company doesn't make money. Because we never made money. And I got involved in helping manage the business. You know, we had about 25 employees or so, and it wasn't long before I was figuring out that managing 25 people wasn't a whole lot different than the first job I had. You know, dealing with about the same kind of stuff most of the time. Now, that went on for 10 years or so, and then in 1989, my dad got a mission call, and he showed up and he said to we brothers, would you like to buy this business? Now, you see, small contracting businesses aren't sellable. They aren't sellable to anybody. They have no value. And as you learn in the E-Myth, when you're building a business, you're supposed to be building value in the business so the business itself can sell. But ours, like every other one, really wasn't very marketable. The problem is Dad had a mission call and wanted to go on a mission, so me and my brothers made an agreement with him and we bought his company from him. And then we started having some real life-changing experiences. I remember it wasn't very long after Dad left that the bank called up and said, gee, guys, we understand you're the new business owners for your dad's business. Would you mind coming down to the bank? And by the way, bring your wives with you. We'd like to meet them too. And they had quite a few documents for us when we got there. They were called personal guarantees. And we and our wives, all 6 of us, got to sign personal guarantees guaranteeing all the debts of that business. And we had some big ones. And so that was really sobering for us. And so we'd signed our lives away, and then we went back to work. And we just kept on working hard. Well, milepost number 3 comes about 2.5 years later. I got a direct mail letter from some consultants, a couple of heating and air conditioning guys who'd had the bright idea that if they taught other heating and air guys how to make money, that they could then create a big national company. And so they invited us, they sent us a solicitation saying, we'll teach you how to make double-digit net profits in your heating and air conditioning business. Now, we'd never made hardly any profit. Every once in a while we made one by accident, but the next year we lost it. So overall, we hadn't been making any money. So the idea of making over 10% net profit was really something. So on borrowed funds, I was able to make it back to St. Louis to listen to these guys. They called their company Contractor Success Group. And they, you know, I was one of 200 or 300 contractors that signed up to hear about this great story. Well, I went back to, by the way, anytime you see this thing that says idea, if you want to take any notes, that's what you want to take notes on. The idea screens, all right? I went back to this, what they called a success day, and they were recruiting new clients. And John Young stood up, and the first thing that he said is, do you know what the definition of insanity is? Does anybody here know it? Probably not yet. If you think you can do the same thing tomorrow that you're doing today and get different results, you're insane. Well, he might as well have taken a rifle out and shot me right between the eyes, because I'd been doing the same thing, harder and harder, year after year, for 13 or 14 years, getting no different results. And I realized that I was nuts, and there's something that needed to change. Well, of course, those guys, they had an answer to the problem. They were going to teach us business systems and stuff that would help us make money. And you know, I was so excited. Everything they said made sense. I decided I wanted to buy. I didn't even know how much money it was going to cost. But by the end of the day, when they called and said, anybody that wants to be saved, come down to the front and sign up, I was first in line. And I signed up and signed for $15,000 that we would pay to join that outfit. And I went home and told my brothers, guess what? We owe a little more money, but we're going to solve our problems. It was great. Now, right after I got home, before I went to my first meeting with them, they sent me this book, The E-Myth. And you see, I told you before I'd spent 10 years working, but not doing anything but working on my job. I had quit reading. I'd quit studying. I'd quit going to seminars and everything. And this was the first book that I'd read in years, and certainly the first business book. And you know, I laughed, I cried. My brothers and I laughed and cried. We thought for sure this guy had stolen our journal and written it in his book. It was so true. It was all about, if you've read the E-Myth yet, you know, the technician's the guy that has the entrepreneurial seizure. All of a sudden now he's a boss. He doesn't know what he's doing. But he's great at serving customers, and then the thing grows and it turns into a mess. And it was just a great story, and it was all true. Every bit of it. And I came out of it with the idea you've got to be working on your business, not in your business, right? That's one of the prime ones. And the other one is that you have to have business systems. That's what Michael Gerber teaches. You've got to have business systems to make it work. So that's what they sent us before we ever went to the first boot camp. Now, my boot camp was scheduled for about the 7th of December. And the reason I can remember it is my 5th son was scheduled for about the 5th of December. And he came on the 4th of December. And so my wife had the baby on Friday, and I brought him home on Saturday, and I climbed on the plane on Sunday and went to Orlando and spent 8 days there. And I didn't make any friends in Provo while I was doing that. Anyway, but I went back and had my first week of intensive training on business systems that would make us profitable. And I felt like I was drinking out of a fire hose all week. But I was so excited that I couldn't even sleep at night. Somebody finally had the answers, you know. And you see, I had enough experience doing it the wrong way that now that my attitude had changed, when somebody who knew what they were doing told me, I could tell it was right, you know, because I'd tried it all the other ways. And then when they said, oh, you just do it this way. Oh, yeah, that works. So it was really, really exciting. You know, this is how bad it was. When we joined that group, our annual sales were about $1.5 million a year. We had about a 30% gross margin, which happens to be the national average in that industry, and we were earning 0 net profit. Now, we had 0 net profit after we'd paid ourselves, the three of us, about $100,000 a year. That's total, so we were making $30,000, $35,000 each. We had 19 or 20 employees, and at that point, when we joined, we had $400,000 in debt. That's pretty tough for a bunch of young bucks. And we got involved with Contractor Success Group, and they brought people in to talk to us. Zig Ziglar, the sales trainer, and Jim Rohn. Now, if you've never heard of Jim Rohn, you need to go to Nightingale, Conant, and get stuff from Jim Rohn. Jim calls himself a business philosopher. I bought every audio tape and videotape he'd made, and me and my brothers passed him around and listened to him. We got to the point where we could mimic him. He was great. I never heard him say anything that wasn't true. He used a lot of scriptures and stuff, a lot of Old Testament stories and New Testament stories and everything to teach his points, but he was great. And he said, You've got to work harder on yourself than you do on your job or anything else. And man, was that a wake-up call for me. I'd spent 11 or 12 years just working on my job. And I'd been neglecting myself. See, the thing that Jim teaches you is, in the end, the only thing you really bring to the marketplace is you. Your skills, your abilities, your talents. That's what you bring. And I'd been neglecting that. And you know, it changed my whole life to get this into my heart. You got to work harder on yourself. I remember one day, about that time, I decided to set a goal. I had not been reading. So I decided, I'm going to read a book. And I'm going to read a book every month. And about 180 books later, I can stand here and tell you today that was a good decision. That's changed me. That's made it so that I can talk to more people and understand more people's experiences. It's just changed everything to decide that that's what you're working on. Well, we were having fun. This was exciting. We go to hear speakers. We read their stuff. We were improving our business. Oh, the next book that came along, Stephen Covey's book. Actually, I'd been reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People when my wife was in labor to have that baby. It's a boring book, and I put it away and didn't go back to it for a couple of years. But when I went back to it, I had a different attitude. You know that 7 Habits is the most popular business book that's ever been written. And in it, there's some darn important stuff. I can tell you that before I read that book, I had never, ever been associated with a profitable enterprise. Then I read that book, and I spent months reading it, and I studied it, and I implemented it in my life, and I taught it to all my employees so that I really understood it well. And I can tell you that since I read that book, I have never failed to be profitable in any business I've been a part of. That's how important it was. Ideas are important. Well, after about 5 years, our results had changed. Our sales went from $1.5 million to about $3.5 million a year. Our margins went up from 30% to 45%. And we ended up with 16% net profit left over after we'd paid ourselves triple the salaries. Along the way, we were able to pay off all our debt. The number of employees we had didn't grow near as fast as our sales did. It was fabulous. We were one of the most profitable heating and air conditioning companies in the United States. And in this country, heating and air conditioning is done by small family businesses. Well, then the group's goals were realized, and a bunch of us rolled up in a consolidation, became a national company, and we got stock that was traded on the New York Exchange in exchange for our little small company stock. And all of a sudden, instead of being the president of a little teeny company, I was a hired manager for a big company, for a department that I used to own. Well, that was the harvest. It was pretty fun. We sold that business in 1996. The sales price on it was 10 times what we'd paid our dad 7 years earlier. The only reason we were able to do that was because of the business systems that we'd implemented and the way we'd changed ourselves. Nobody would have paid us anything for it without that. Well, about 1.5 years later, this company that had bought our company informed me that they didn't need me in their company anymore, and so I was sitting around trying to, it was this time, 10 years ago, I was sitting around going, I wonder what I'm going to do to keep myself busy now. And the first thing I thought about is, what in the world have I learned? Well, there were 3 key lessons that made the biggest difference in the success of our heating and air conditioning business. The first one was, I'd learned that you can increase the perceived value of a service by changing the way you deliver it. See, heating and air conditioning is a really generic service. Anybody with some tools and some gauges can do it, right? There's lots of competitors. And so what we did is we changed the way we delivered the service. These were really high-tech changes, like wearing a clean uniform, saying, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, shaving, not smoking. We even bought some little surgical booties so that when a technician showed up at somebody's door, before they went in, they'd put these booties on the door so that they wouldn't get the carpets dirty. That's how high-tech this is. But these are all little business systems that contributed to our customers feeling like we were delivering more value to them. And in doing so, our gross margins increased from 30 to 45%, but that's a 50% increase. But not only that, what was cool is our customers were happier than they'd been before because they felt like we were taking better care of them. So this was great. Important point. I understand that most of the people who come talk to you often give product-related lectures or stories. I'm in the service business, right? So this is an important point. You can change the perceived value of that service by changing the way you deliver it. Another thing that I'd learned along the way that Ken Blanchard happened to say, and I agreed with, profits are the applause that our clients give us for service that's beyond the ordinary. By the way, Ken Blanchard's really the guru of the service business, service industry. Now, as an illustration of this point, there's a hotel downtown. Have you ever seen the Marriott Hotel downtown? Have you? They built that hotel about 30 years ago, and there was a Trust House Forte that owned it, and there was I don't know how many different companies owned that hotel, and that hotel in Provo could not make any money. Never made any money. It's always broke. And then a company called Marriott Corporation signed an agreement to manage it, and guess what? Been making money ever since. Why? Service. Marriott Corporation is the world leader. There is nobody that does customer service in the hospitality business like Marriott does. Everything they touch makes money. So if you own a service business, and like my old business, it's not making any money, you know that the service that you're rendering is not distinguishable from anybody else's. You're not doing a better job than anybody else, and therefore nobody's paying you anymore. So if you want to make money in service, you've got to give better service. And then finally, I was listening to Jim Rohn one day, and he quoted Jesus from the New Testament. Jesus said, "He that's greatest among you shall be your servant." Have you ever gone to church or gone anywhere and heard a scripture quoted and it had a new meaning to you? Well, boy, oh boy, when he said this, I got it. All of a sudden, I figured it out. This is an eternal economic principle, as well as anything else you ever thought it was. Economic principle. For instance, everybody in the country's got a PC, right? They're worth absolutely nothing unless they have an operating system on them. Back in the 1980s, 1983 or so, they invented the PC, and a guy named Bill Gates, who was my age, decided to start a little company and make an operating system for him. And since then, he's become the richest man in the United States. And I believe, now I don't care if you like his politics or anything else about him, he served us. He made those machines useful to us. And he did a better job than anybody else. And in the process of serving us, we made him the richest man in the country. What I got was, we can follow Jesus. We can be worried about following Jesus. We can learn how to be better servants. And the natural outcome of that is going to be our personal economic well-being. See, that was important to me. You've got to realize, most Christians who are entrepreneurs have problems with stories about camels and eyes of needles and stuff like that, and rich men, right? It's harder for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than to, whatever. Christians have problems with that because they're out there trying to make money and they're worried. Oh, gee, what about that? Well, Jesus said, be the best servant. Just be the best servant. Well, as I reviewed things before starting a new venture, I found that I had some more tools in my pouch. I started out knowing how to do accounting and having some communication skills, but over that last 6 years, I had learned how to do marketing. I'd learned how to do sales. I'd learned how to do sales training. And I'd learned how to do business systems development. So I had a lot more tools in the pouch now than I had before, and it was time to start on a new venture. What should I do next? Well, what I decided to do was 3-day kitchen and bath. And guess what? The idea came from Michael Gerber, the E-Myth. He wrote another book called PowerPoint, and he was trying to come up with a hypothetical example of how a guy could do something. He came up with this idea of some framers who decided to remodel kitchens in 3 days. That's where the idea came from. So, it was time to start a new business called 3-Day Kitchen and Bath. Now, Mr. Covey says if you're going to be highly successful, you got to see the end from the beginning. So my partner and I sat down and said, okay, what do we want the end to be? What do we want to get out of this business? First, we wanted to render an extraordinary service with tremendous value to people for 2 reasons. Number one, we like doing good things for other people, making them happy. And number 2, we understand that that's the only way you make any money. So that was our first goal. And our second goal is we wanted to make a great living for ourselves. Back there in '96, I figured $10,000 a month would be pretty good. So that was the goal. Well, on top of that, we wanted to have time for our family and church service. So this business of 10-hour days, 6 days a week, that went out the window. I wanted to have 3-day weekends. So we decided to set that for a goal. Also, we wanted to have a low-stress work life. Does this act like it doesn't add up? Yeah, the last one was I wanted 6 or 8 weeks a year off to go on family vacations and scout trips and stuff like that. Not much to ask, but that's what the goal was. And so away we went. First thing we knew is we had to simplify. You see, stress in business is a direct function of the number of employees that you have. So if you want to not have stress, you can't have very many employees. That's just the way it is. And we came up with a bit of a unique idea. Every entrepreneur wants to go out and change the world with a huge business, but we'd already gone from big to small to big, and our idea was rather than make it huge, we decided to make it really small. Our idea was, how small can we make a business and still make it really, really profitable? How small can we make it and still deliver so much value that there'll be a margin there? That was the question. And that's what we decided to do, because you see, that feeds on number one. If the business is small enough, you're not going to have a bunch of employees and have a lot of stress. And to continue with the idea was, instead of having a business that would grow, and get more and more complex and harder to manage, what we wanted to do is like building a little teeny Swiss watch and making it work really, really smooth, really, really well. And so if we could get this little Swiss watch business model so it would work perfect, then the idea was, instead of growing that, just replicate it. Just do more of the small ones instead of trying to make it bigger and reorganize it and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we did. Well, okay, we were facing some pain in the market. That's what you guys talk about when you're talking about entrepreneurship, isn't it? There's something out there that needs to be fixed. And the pain was, most kitchen remodeling jobs, if you can believe this, take 4 to 6 weeks. 3 to 4 months for a kitchen, and bathrooms take 4 to 6 weeks. Now, I knew this for sure because my kitchen nearly burned down, so we had to build a new one at our house, or remodel ours, and we moved the whole family into the basement, all 7 of us, for 3 months. And so I had gone through this miserable experience of living in a construction zone, and by the time I got done with that, I said, man, somebody's got to fix this. There's just got to be a better way to do that. Also, we realized other people felt the same way. They didn't remodel their houses, even though they had the money to and they wanted to, just because they didn't want to go through the nightmare of living through it. So we came up with an approach to solve that problem. And our unique selling proposition, and by the way, if you're going to go into business, if you can't sit down and write down a unique selling proposition that tells why you're different than everybody else and you solve their problem, then you don't start your business yet. Make sure you can write the USP first. Ours is pretty simple. Top-notch kitchen and bathroom remodeling from floor to ceiling in 3 days or less, guaranteed. That's what we deliver. Problem is, we hadn't figured out how to do it yet. So that's where the business systems came in. Now, here's an example of a kitchen that I ran onto last year. It's kind of beat up. This old bachelor has a couple of dogs that weigh 100 pounds, big dogs, and he kind of locked them in the kitchen for a decade, and they've made a mess of things. And he decided that he wanted to get rid of the dogs and get some relatives back to visit, I guess. And so, look what we did in 3 days. Pretty big difference, huh? Not 3 months, 3 days. Now, this master bathroom, a family's lived with for 30 years, This couple's got it. You can see where the handle is for the shower there, right? So the shower's here behind this wall. And we came in, and in 3 days, we turned it into that. So we've moved the toilet from one place to another. We've made a nice, big, spacious shower. We've got a skylight in there, new cabinetry, new flooring, paint on the walls. Everything's brand new. Electrical's upgraded, plumbing's upgraded. This is a new room. It's good for another 40 years. Quite a miracle, huh? Want me to show you how the miracle works? It starts out looking pretty ugly. This is an old kitchen in Salt Lake, very small. It's got 3 doors and 2 windows in that kitchen. We're looking in from the front door of this little house into the kitchen there. And here's another look from farther right, looking into the tiny kitchen. That's what we started with. Well, to work our miracle, we have to come in and work awful fast. So the first thing we start doing is just tearing things apart in a big hurry. We've got to knock everything down because we start from scratch and make it beautiful. You know, we've got new wiring in the ceiling, new lights and everything. We've got to do the whole thing. And when we get done, that's the view from the kitchen. Another one from the living room. It's a pretty small kitchen in this case, but a big, big change. We do miracles, folks. By the way, do miracles happen? They sure do, don't they? Why do we call them miracles? This is from Jim Rohn. Because we don't know how they happen. We just know they happen, right? And 3-Day Kitchen and Bath has miracles happen every week. The miracle and the magic is that we've got business systems that allow us to produce consistent results. Now, I want to tell you how consistent it is. I've been doing it for 9.5 years now. I have never, not once, not since the very first job, have I ever had a job that didn't get done on time. That's consistency. Yes?
So is this, I mean, you go in there and then 3 days later you do it, or do you drop the business plan, order all the materials, and then once you start work, so you're 72 hours on the job?
We're 72 hours from the time we start doing the remodel.
Okay, so
yeah, there's preparation time involved.
Okay.
You bet there is. Now, the next thing that's really, really important is we use what we call enlightened leadership principles to make it work. We establish really healthy relationships with all the parties, the homeowners, the vendors, the subcontractors, everybody. We've got to have these great relationships. We've got to build trust and confidence in all of them. And what that does, if we do it right, is it liberates all the creativity in these wonderful craftsmen that work for us. And they do amazing things. Yes, sir. This enlightened leadership principles. The fact is, in the construction industry, nobody trusts each other. They don't treat each other right. Are you an honest man? You are, right? Do you like to be treated like an honest man? In the construction industry, people are not treated like they're honest. What happens when we come along and we find a good guy like you that's honest, and we say, you know, I believe you're honest, and I'm going to treat you like you're honest. What will you do for me? You'll do anything for me. He'll do anything for me because I trusted him. Trust is the thing that's in the shortest supply. No. We've just got a few people that we've got on board that understand our game, and we can make it work. Now, we've got a lot of business systems. It takes a lot of business systems. We've got to find new customers, so we've got turnkey marketing systems. We do radio, TV, direct mail, newspaper, home shows, all that kind of stuff. Once you've found a customer, you've got to sell them. So we've got professional selling systems so that we're not walking in and sitting down in front of somebody and thinking, gee, I wonder what I ought to say this time. We've got a proven approach to it. We've got professional design systems. You see, once we've impressed them with our system and told them they say, yeah, I'd like you to work for me. Well, then we've got to design a great kitchen or bathroom for them. So we've got systems for that. Once we've got it designed, we've got to estimate what it's going to cost so that we can make a proposal and be assured that it's going to be profitable for us. We need operating systems. You see, we're making a lot of promises here. We've got to keep them all. So we've got operating systems on how to do everything so that when we get to the end of the road, we've kept all our promises. We've got to have scorekeeping systems so that we know what the score is. That's accounting, by the way, but it's more fun when you're keeping score on your own business. That's when accounting's fun. And we've got a lot more systems. We've got all kinds of business systems. Now, do you think our clients like us?
Now, we had 2 bathrooms. It was from the 1950s. We didn't know what to expect. We were a little skeptical that they could actually do this in that short a period of time. They did an amazing job. Brand new tub, shower, toilet, sink, cabinetry, flooring, tile, you name it.
Was you happy with the finished product?
Very impressive. And we're just anxious to show it off to people now.
So you recommend 3D kitchen and bath?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, we can probably get a few more miles out of our kitchen, but when the time comes to do that, we'll definitely call it back. It's about time. A 3-day kitchen and bath.
I tell you, that guy was my customer. I was so pleased when I got that unscripted ad back, and he said he was going to buy a kitchen someday because he was so happy with the bathrooms. That's what our business is based on, pleasing people so much that they want to call again. I'm starting work on the biggest kitchen I've ever done next Tuesday, and it's for somebody whose bathroom I did 4.5 years ago. That's how the business is supposed to grow, is on referrals and repeat customers. Now, if you want to learn more about how we approach our clients at 3-Day Kitchen and Bath, you can go to our website at www.3daykitchen.com. So, I am a general contractor. I live in Sandy now. I own my own 3-Day Kitchen and Bath business. I have no other employees besides me, and I run this business. Now it's time to take the next step. Since we'd perfected all the systems, since we'd made it so that it works, and by the way, it worked. It was so fun. We started with a blank sheet of paper, and the first year out of the chute, we beat all our goals. That was a blast. Well, now we realize that we can do more. There's some pain out there in the market, you see. Small general contractors around the United States all face cutthroat competition. Anybody that's got a hammer and a saw can compete with them. And the fact is that they are not usually profitable. You'll hear people complain about being ripped off or that contractors are making too much money. But guess what, folks? They don't. They work about 60 to 80 hours every week, and their lifestyle really stinks. They do this constant back-breaking work. They don't have any time for their families. Life as a small remodeling contractor isn't good. It's lonely. And the problem is they're so far in debt usually that there's no way out of it. That's the problem out there. So, we've got a solution. See, we've created the business system. We're already doing it, and we thought we'd find some other people that would like to do it too. But in order for you to understand our little 3-Day Kitchen and Bath business system a little better, you got to understand a little bit about cows. Is there anybody here that understands anything about cows? Anybody here knows anything about cows? One. That's amazing. And Brother Price here. He had a career milking cows for a while. What kind of a cow is that? Tell me.
Big one.
That's a big one. Okay. What else do you know about it? What brand of cow is it? That's called a breed in cow. What breed of cow? It's a Holstein. And how do we know it's a Holstein cow? Because it's got black and white spots on it and it's big and bony, right? Now, it just so happens that in the dairy industry, 90% of the cows in the United States are Holsteins. And the reason is that Holstein cows produce far and away more milk than any other cow does. That's why everybody's got them. They produce a lot of milk, but over the last decades, small farmers have all gone out of business. There are no such things as small dairy farmers because they all bought the wrong model. You see, they all bought this high-volume, low-margin model. They had a little farm with some big Holstein cows. Each cow produced a lot of milk, but they were still only selling a little bit of milk. They didn't have any economies of scale, and they all went broke. It's kind of like, can you imagine opening up a True Value hardware store next door to Home Depot? You wouldn't do very well. And that was the problem. So that's what's happened in the dairy industry. Now, when my dad was a kid, They had a family cow. Does anybody know? Can you see the difference between this cow and the other cow? What's the difference? It's a different color, isn't it? It's called a Jersey cow. Jersey. That's the kind Brother Price had. Jersey cows are different than Holstein cows. They weigh about 40% less than Holstein. So instead of weighing 1,500 pounds, they weigh 800 or 900 pounds or something like that. They cost less, about 20% less to feed, and they produce less. They produce about 23% less milk on average than a Holstein. But that's plenty if what you want's a family cow. You see, if you had a Holstein for your family cow, you'd just be throwing milk away. It just produces way too much milk. But it works great with a Jersey cow. Now, there's some other advantages of a Jersey cow. If you take a gallon of Jersey milk compared to a gallon of Holstein milk, the Jersey milk has more nutrients in it. It's got 15% more calcium, 20% more protein. You can make 25% more cheese and 30% more butter out of Jersey milk than you can out of Holstein milk. And the reason is there's more butterfat in it. And the really cool thing about Jerseys is they produce 32% less manure. And I know about that because I've been in that business. Now, why am I talking about cows, and what does that have to do with 3-Day Kitchen and Bath? Well, 3-Day Kitchen and Bath is a cash cow for a family. That's what it is. It's what it's designed to be. Is it profitable? You bet it is. It is 2 to 3 times more profitable than other contractors in the same field. Now, I'm going to show you the family secrets here about how 3-Day Kitchen and Bath businesses work. This is the typical results for a one-man business like me running a 3-Day Kitchen and Bath remodeling operation. In the course of a year, sell about $50,000 in kitchens or bathroom remodeling per month, which adds up to about $600,000 a year in sales. If he's doing it right and using our model, he's going to have costs of about 55%, so his gross margin is going to be up at 45%. Now, he's going to have some overhead costs there. He's going to have marketing costs of about $48,000, and he's going to have about another $48,000 in all his other overhead and fees. So the total expenses are coming in at $96,000, and that means that this contractor, who used to not make any money, can run this business by himself and have around $174,000 or so left over at the end of the year for himself. Quite an improvement. Not 80 hours a week, not breaking his back on the job. Time to spend with his family. So that's what we're offering. Now, this cash cow of ours requires some real special care. It needs a trained professional. And this professional's got to have a real significant profit motive, and he has to have a lot of risk involved. This is not a part-time operation. It takes a full-time commitment. So you see, as we talk to potential people from around the country that want to be 3-Day Kitchen and Bath dealers, a lot of them that call us are a $3 to $4 or $5 million a year general contractor who wants another department. And he thinks it'd be cool to do 3-Day Kitchen and Bath as a department. And we have a nice conversation with them, but we say, you know, our business model doesn't fit your business. We're sorry. This business works when one man has got everything at stake, and he gets to keep all the profits, and he gets to live with all the losses. That's what creates the level of service that we deliver to our customers. Our unique selling proposition, as we go to try to find contractors or other people who may want to be dealers, tries to address the pain in the market. We say, would you like to eliminate the competition, earn good profits every year, and make friends with winners? Then take control of your life and join 3-Day Kitchen and Bath. That's the current entrepreneurial venture I'm in. That's what we're trying to accomplish. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
So how did, you said you're the only employee. How does that work?
Well, you see, have you ever had a job?
Yeah.
Have you ever worked for somebody you didn't like?
Yeah.
Has anybody in the room ever worked for somebody they didn't like? Do you think that that was lost on your employer, or did he kind of know you didn't like him much? He did, didn't he? Well, over the years, I've had a lot of employees, and I found that employees don't treat bosses very well. I could be really nice, I could be loving and caring and friends and everything, but for some reason, it's easy to treat the boss badly. Like he's a son of a gun. He makes you work after all, right? But when I went to Salt Lake to start the business for the second time, I tried to find employees, and I found a guy that was really well qualified, but he was a general contractor, and he wanted to continue to be his own contractor. So he says, I just want to subcontract to you, and I'll do the work for you. And do you know what he treats me like? A customer. He loves me. He wants to please me. He can't fall over himself enough to do what I ask him to do. And he never grumbles, and he's never ornery with me like employees have been in the past. So I prefer a business model where I'm the only employee, and I work with skilled people to do the jobs that I have going. That's a long answer to a short question. Yes, ma'am.
So when you get your 6 to 8 weeks off a year, are you just not doing jobs? You just earn enough? Well, and I guess now that you've sold a lot of franchises, I guess you can take off as much as you want.
That's not true. I haven't got enough yet. But I can work it in. See, I can say, okay, I'm going to start this job on Tuesday, and I'll leave on my vacation on Wednesday. Which opens up another question. You see, my crews are so well trained, they're so independent, they're so self-motivated that I never, ever step on the job between the time we start it and when I go back to make final inspection and collect for it.
Who do you have that actually designs the kitchens and bathrooms, like what tile, what colors?
I do.
You do all that?
Yeah. Any other questions? I think we're out of time, folks. Thanks for coming.